Lawrence in Chacahula. Never heard of Chacahula? It's located on US Highway 90 in South Terrebonne Parish, about midway between Houma and Morgan City. Then, in 1918, Father Bastille got the call from the Archbishop to come here to Destrehan and reopen the Old Red Church. The Old Red Church had not had a pastor here in over 40 years. Ever since 1877, when the rectory was destroyed by fire and was never rebuilt. At the time that Father Bastille reported to assume his duties in 1918, the church was also under an interdict because of a disagreement between the trustees of the church and the Archbishop. And the interdict meant that the church was closed. No Mass could be said there, no sacraments could be administered. Now you've all heard the little story about how Father Bastille wrested the keys of the Old Red Church from the trustees, even after an auxiliary bishop had failed to do so. And I think everybody gives Father Bastille most of the credit for reopening the Red Church. But it was the Mexican Petroleum Corporation that was instrumental in getting the interdict lifted and clearing the way for Father Bastille to reopen the Red Church. The refinery started operations here in 1916, and there was an assistant superintendent of the refinery by the name of Patrick Kelly. He was a native of Ireland and a very devout Catholic. And the refinery attracted a lot of Catholic workers and their families. So Mr. Kelly saw the need for having a church here to service the members of the refinery. And so it was he who negotiated between the trustees and between the Archbishop that resulted in the interdict being lifted and Father Bastille could open the church. The refinery also gave the church at that time $20,000 for the erection of a rectory and a church. So you can see that the motives of Mexican Petroleum were not completely altruistic. They received benefits too because they had a church to service their workers. By 1921, Father Bastille had completed this magnificent church we have, which in 6 years, by the way, will be 100 years old. In 1929, he started the first parochial school on the East Bank between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And to operate his school, he turned to the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception that he had met so many years before at St. Vincent de Paul. In 1948, he started St. Charles Borromeo High School. Now, I don't know when the idea for a high school had its inception, but all the stars were in alignment after the end of World War II, because enrollment had ballooned to the point where in 1946, when I was in the 6th grade, Sister Martha had 60 students in her class. And I think this was the tipping point. This was a time when Father Bastille and Sister Valerie, as the principal of the elementary school, decided that this was a sufficient pool to start the nucleus of a high school. So in 1948, the first class was added. Then we added a class every year until 1952, when the school graduated its first class of 20 students. Now, our first class in a high school was in a balcony, which is covered now. They've lowered the ceiling and covered the balcony. But that was our first classroom. And it was from this balcony that we witnessed the altercation between Father Bastille and the manager of the cafeteria that resulted in his transfer after 30 years. That resulted in his transfer to the church in New Orleans. I forget the name of it. It's in the Treme district. In any event, he was reassigned to that church. which he always sarcastically referred to in conversations with me as his Babylonian exile. But he stayed there until his death in 1956 at the age of 74. Now here's an interesting thing. When Father Bastide died, the newspapers just praised him to the sky. I mean, the eulogies, the memorials to Father Bastide. So much so that if the good Lord were reading the Times-Picayune and reading one of these memorials, he would not have recognized one of his own creatures. But the reason for all of this adulation, of course, was that with his will, after he died, it was discovered that Father Bastide had donated over $500,000 of his own money to religious institutions. And after all of the storms that he weathered in his life, he was buried in the tranquility of the Abbey burying ground at St. Benedict. He had previously given $20,000 to St. Joseph's Seminary for the construction of a gymnasium for the seminarians. His gravesite is marked by a simple headstone and in an area that's reserved in the cemetery for clergy. May the earth lie softly on Father John. And now I'd like to pause just for a moment and give recognition to our teachers, the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception. And I'd like to dwell briefly on the lives and careers of three remarkable women. The first was Elvina Vienne. I doubt that many of you in this audience ever heard of Elvina Vienne. Elvina Vienne was the foundress of the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception, and she was born right here on the German coast. She was born in St. John the Baptist Parish across the river in an area that's now the community of Wallace. And she attended school across the river at the renowned convent of the Sacred Heart. And at the convent of the Sacred Heart, she met a young French priest by the name of Cyprien Benisat. Father Benisat later became the first pastor of St. Philomena in Labbeville. And after the Civil War, he tried to get an order of nuns to start a school there. Failing this, he remembered Elvina Vienne and what a brilliant student she had been at the Academy of the Sacred Heart. She was teaching school in New Orleans at the time. So he invited her to start an order of nuns. She received her veil from the Archbishop and took in religion the name of Mother Mary. And she founded the second indigenous order of nuns in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. By indigenous, I mean it was native in Louisiana. It was founded here in Louisiana, as contrasted with the Ursulines and Dominicans and Sisters of the Sacred Heart orders that were founded in Europe and then came to America. Does anybody know what the first indigenous order of nuns was? The Sisters of the Holy Family, founded by a free woman of color, Henriette DeLille. And she founded that order of sisters at St. Augustine in New Orleans, where Father Bastide served his exile. She has been beatified, and she is a candidate for canonization. Right now, there's an exhibit at the old Ursuline Convent. I think the name of it is Six Saintly Women and Brother Silos. But the centerpiece of that exhibit is Henriette DeLille, that free woman of color. And if you visit this exhibit, please step next door into St. Mary's Church. That was the original chapel of the Ursuline nuns. It's an outstandingly beautiful little church. And it is the church where Father Bastide celebrated his first Mass after ordination. Now, where was I? I'm talking about Mother Mary. Mother Mary in her life founded 3 schools: Lavelyville, St. Vincent de Paul, and Lockport. Her life was cut short in 1877, and she died of cancer at the age of 51. Sister Valerie, the second one I want to talk about, was our first principal of the high school. Sister Valerie also had ties to the German coast. She descended from Urbain Picou, who came here with his family in 1720, bound for one of John Law's concessions. He settled in St. Charles Parish, and 5 of his children were baptized in the Church of the Germans across the river in Taft. Sister Valerie was born in Patterson, Louisiana. When we were in school, we always asked her where she was born, and she always jokingly said Patterson, New Jersey. But she was christened Addie, A-D-D-I-E. It was the same name, Addie Ann Picou. But she didn't stay in Patterson very long, because her father, right after her birth, moved the family to New Orleans, to the Upper Ninth Ward. Their parish church, St. Vincent de Paul. Sister Valerie attended school with the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception, graduating in 1929. She immediately entered the convent, and by 1935 she was assigned here to Destrehan. I think this was her only assignment, and I'm guessing when I say this, but as church organist, I think Father Bastille wanted to retain her here in that capacity. Like Mother Mary, the founders of the order, Sister Valerie died of cancer at the age of 51 in 1965. And the last one I'd like to talk to you about, simply because she had such a marvelous career and made such contributions to both her order and the church, is Sister Mary Clare. She taught briefly here and taught first grade. Sister Mary Clare was a nun for 62 years. Now I know how long that is, because last month Evelyn and I celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary. It's a long time. Now, I say that as a compliment, Evelyn. But I can see she's not buying, and I shouldn't be selling. There's not going to be any hippies tonight. But anyway, Sister Clare received her education at Dominican College in New Orleans. She received a degree in elementary education. In 1968, she founded the last school that was associated with the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception. That was Holy Rosary in La Rose, just down by the Fouche from Lockport. She was a missionary. She served as a missionary for the city of Saltillo in Old Mexico. And she was the recipient of the highest award that can be awarded or bestowed by the Pope on a layperson. I don't know Latin too well, but it was por Ecclesia et Pontifex, which means for church and Pope. Hers was truly a miraculous service to her order. I think you know that at the time, we took the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception for granted, but they served a very important role in educating youth in southern Louisiana during Reconstruction and afterwards. They founded schools in Lavelyville, Lockport, New Orleans, Destrehan, Vacherie, White Castle, Church Point, and La Rose. And I think the high water mark of the order was in 1940,